Two-minute warning. We'll get started in 2 minutes. You'll start finding your seats. What's this session on?
Caseworker? Or well. Yeah. Okay. Within the Bible. Okay. Yep. Sure. Uh-huh.
This person is the most
Thank you for doing your. Oh, gosh, that's weird. Okay.
And I think it was George.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
Agree with that.
Yep.
We can find our seats, we'll go ahead and get started. Good morning once again. Glad to have you all here. My name is Jerry Shearer. I am with All Souls ECC in Reading, Pennsylvania, and also serve with the House of Pastors Steering Committee. I was asked just to kind of help facilitate this morning's session called All Are Welcome. What does it mean? And we have three folks who are going to speak to us this morning about some of their ministries and being sure they're being welcoming to all. We're going to give, so each person will have about 15 minutes. It's right up to lunchtime. We'll present and ask questions, and then move on to the second person. To kind of get us in the mindset of this morning, I just wanted to share something read a little while ago and kind of hit me, and it might be good just to bring it back to help us focus this morning. This is from the book Modern Kinship. Those who have read it, you probably recognize it. How often do we fail to see the life in other people? We do it with staggering frequency every time we distance people from us by classifying them as other. On the macro level, we treat them as other when they are from different countries, ethnicities, or religion, or regions, or colleges, or political parties. On the micro level, we dismiss individuals because they are weird, or poor, or ugly, or fat, or differently abled. It is easy to categorize people. We've been doing it since we were children, choosing tables in the cafeteria at lunch. But the more we wedge otherness between us and those we don't like or understand, the less humanity we see in them. When we disassociate ourselves from people, let me just try that again. When we disassociate ourselves from people, they stop being beings and become things. They are dead birds worthy of nothing but a trash bin. If only the church were to look in the direction, and the book's focused on LGBTQ people, and watch them take a breath. We see them kick and flutter, fighting for life in a hostile world. What a shift in perspective the church would experience once we see the humanity in its people. It's impossible to dismiss them as things. No person could be gross, for each is a living, breathing reflection of God.
Amen.
So to start us off this morning, we have Brother Peter Fitch. Thank you. It's all yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Jerry, and it's so great to present to this little group of people who are becoming friends and acquaintances. I'm Peter Beach. I'm a member of Benedictines of Holy Wisdom, and I'm also a member of Mary Magdalene Church in East Rochester, New York. I'm going to show you a little bit about a ministry that I started during my novitiate with Benedictines. We dedicated my house as a spiritual gathering spot, and we named it Casa Gubbio. Gubbio is the town in Italy, a lot of you know, where Francis confronted the wolf. Some people say Francis tamed the wolf. We prefer to say Francis negotiated peace with the wolf. But the wolf to us is more of a Jungian reality. It's the dark side, or the wolf is something within us that we're confronting. The group was started by a group of people in long-term drug addiction and alcoholism recovery, and then widened out to become a group for everybody that wanted to come. Half of the people that come are gay, half straight, different ethnicities. We have Jewish friends who comes all the time, who loves it. But before I talk a lot about it, I'm going to let them talk about it and play the video for you. This is a little gathering that we had 2 months ago for the Feast of San Gennaro in September. Denise, I'm a religious brother. I'm not an ordained priest, so different people. We have ordained priests at Spiritus. Lori and Denise are ordained priests at Mary Magdalene. So we have different priests who come and say mass, or in absence of a priest, I lead a communion service. But we're very much in cooperation with Bishop Denise, who was with me for the initial planning and the conversations around starting this and creating it. And I consider it an outgrowth of both Benedictines and Mary Magdalene. And we're in Rochester, we all kind of grow out of Corpus, which, you know, we're not going into all that. It came after I talked about it. It is the Feast of San Gennaro. Saint Januarius, or San Gennaro, was the bishop in the early church. So we don't really know a lot about him, but we think that he was executed during Emperor Diocletian's, I don't even know what the persecution. So, but there has been a lot of legends, subsequent legends about San Gennaro, and he's the patron of Naples.
I would say Casa Gubbio really began as a mission within Peter, within his heart, a real desire to really do the work that he already has been doing through the recovery community, through the gift of his home and opening his home to provide opportunities, especially I think for groups and for individuals who may never grace the sanctuary of a church. And when I say grace, I don't mean that that's a better place than here, because that's not at all what I mean by that. But one of the really beautiful things that happens is that when you invite people into your home and you gather around a table, and that is a sacramental table, and it is a place where people can come, they can share what is going on in their lives, and really be able to share from a depth of who they are. There is such beautiful healing that happens there.
Something special happens every time I come here. It's not necessarily about the feast we're celebrating or the topic that we're discussing. It's just something special happens, being around the table together and just sharing the experience.
So I'd originally heard about these gatherings during COVID. People were getting together on Zoom, some of my mutual friends. And I always wondered how I got an invite to these parties. So I remember when they went back in person, and my friend Bob, who does not drive, was invited, and Peter asked if I wanted to come also. So I really enjoyed these gatherings. I was christened a Catholic when I was a baby, but I knew nothing about the Catholic Church and the history and so forth. So I find it very interesting to hear the different history and stories. So that's what I enjoy about these get-togethers.
And I left to go to New York for about 15 years and I realized the journey wasn't happening anymore. And I needed to come back. And when I came back, I saw that Peter at Casa Gubbio had developed this whole spiritual group, which is wonderful. And to just be, I realized the journey isn't, it isn't valuable unless, you're with the right companions. So these are the right companions here, and although I'm not Catholic, I'm Unitarian, I find value in different faiths and people who have faith and it's a spirituality that is deeper than a specific religion.
Good evening, I'm Bob, and I'd love to come to this gathering because wherever people of kindred spirit together, gathered in his name, there he is also. And that's just the religious aspect of it. And then there is the fellowship aspect of it, because when you have a table fellowship, a meal shared, it brings a lot of community together and kindred spirits. And so I just love that atmosphere.
So we come here and we gather and there are gay people and straight people and people in recovery and people who've never had a problem with alcohol or drugs, men, women, gay, straight, black, white, the body of Christ is, I guess, how easily they were described. And everyone is welcome.
Now we turn our attention to the sacrament that we are about to share. And we offer to God the bread and the juice that we share. We say, blessed are you, loving God of all creation, your goodness. We have this bread and this juice to share, which the earth has provided, human hands have prepared. May they become for us our spiritual food and
Blessed be the Spirit.
Hi, good people of Casa.
That's a reading from John Sweeney, who a lot of you also know. But so I think that gives you sort of the gist of what we're doing. We have a monthly gathering. We also have other things during May and October. We've had a weekly rosary gathering. And counter to what Father Jamie said yesterday, the groups that come to Casa Gubbio and several people that come to Mary Magdalene really love our traditions around the rosary, are more offbeat, Catholic, maybe outdated in some people's opinions, practices. Our crew really has an affinity with that and loves them. And Rochester is a very Italian-American city. So we love our Blessed Mother and our rosary traditions. So anyhow, that's part of what we do during Lent. We have weekly Stations of the Cross. This year we even had an Ash Wednesday service. We had a Holy Saturday. Lori Dale came and presided a beautiful Easter vigil for us. Some of you know newly ordained priest Lori Dale, who is now the pastor of Mary Magdalene. So we're very friendly with our local priests from Spiritus, from Mary Magdalene. And there's also a duly ordained Episcopal Lutheran pastor who has come and said mass. So it's nice for the people who participate. Like Denise said in the video, there are people who would never get up on Sunday morning and go to mass. And many of them say all the time, this is the one and only thing I do that honors the religious tradition of my youth, because there are people for many different reasons who have felt othered, as you described. And this is a safe place for them to kind of reemerge into the beauty of our traditions and most importantly to the beauty of the heart of Jesus that I think exists in the circle. And I know that you all agree with me and you're doing similar things in your communities. So if anyone has a question or a comment, I'll entertain them and then we have to move right along to Mir, I think, or Gianni. I don't know. So does anybody have a question? Sure.
The word out.
Oh, boy. I'm kind of how did I get the word out? I'm kind of a little presence in our Rochester community. We started as a group of people in recovery and we've all known each other for 30 plus years. So recovery is a small town. And then when you narrow it down to LGBTQ people in recovery, that makes the town even smaller. So we all kind of know each other. And then through, aside from our monthly gatherings, because we were doing these other gatherings and the recovery people would come to the Rosary, but so would the people from Mary Magdalene or elsewhere, and everybody got to know each other. So at one point, we had to make a decision. Do we really want these monthly gatherings to be exclusive? And what's the point of excluding these people who are now our friends? And of course, all the people, attendees of the recovery group, agreed that we should just make it an open group. So now it's an open group. It is a sober gathering. I mean, we as you heard Denise kind of hint leading into the consecration that there was juice on the table, so nobody had anxiety around receiving both elements. So it's predominantly people in recovery. So it has that focus. And I often say that we start Mass and we have the liturgy of the word, then we break out into an AA meeting, and then we go back and have the consecration. So it's like we have a shared homily. Nobody really preaches their one opinion and leaves it at that. Everybody checks in and they don't even necessarily have to speak to the homily or what. Some people just check in and share what's been going on with them, their joys and sorrows. Maybe they've had a recent loss or a celebration. And the people who didn't know each other at all over the last 3 years have become very well bonded and consider each other friends. So there are very new friendships and there are very, time-worn friendships. Denise, you look like you wanted to say something. I'm going to bring the mic to you.
Okay. Yes, what I do want to say is you notice the informality of our liturgy. Because when we are in a circle, for me to have stood at that point, do you want me up where people can see me? Sorry,
Maybe for
for Zoom. Hi, those on Zoom, I know.
Yeah, no.
Okay, so, the informality in and of itself lends to a welcoming environment. It doesn't mean that we do not say the prayers that are a part of our tradition, but we say them and we live them in a way that really allows people to feel comfortable and feel welcome. At that point, I didn't even reach for the chalice or the paten with the Eucharist, because Buddy, the dog, was sitting at my feet. So it really is an environment that invites people to be themselves, to feel comfortable. We open with the readings. When Peter says we break into an AA meeting, he really means we're still sitting in that same circle at that point, and people are sharing their lives. And then after they're sharing, we go into Eucharist and we celebrate together.
So at Casa Gubbio, we're not just doing a symbolic meal. We also have it's a potluck gathering. So there's much food. There's always way too much food on the table, to the point where I have purchased environmentally friendly takeout containers so that everybody can take the food home with them for the next day. Does anyone else have a question about what we do and why we do it the way we do it? Okay, then, okay, go ahead, David.
The Eucharistic prayer, is there that extemporaneous or what? How do you do that? How do you pray it?
Yes, yeah, the Eucharistic prayer is extemporaneous. It is very much calling people into the place, using words of consecration, making sure that we have an epiclesis, the essential elements that are so important to our Eucharistic prayer. But the words draw people in. That's how we live liturgy. Is not just a reciting of words, but calling in those who are present to feel as though they are represented in that liturgical prayer.
You know, one other thing I want to mention about what we do is that, you know, we're all kind of like people from privilege. So we're not doing much to help anyone else if we're just getting around in my living room and hanging out. So, but we want to have that also, we want to become what we're receiving. So there are a couple people who bring food to the food boxes around our city. Others who come to the gathering have either donated money to them or brought actual items for them to deliver. We have roadside food boxes in our city for people in need. And the thing that we've recently started doing, which I'm really happy about, is that one of our, we went online during COVID, and one of our members who kept coming is an ordained priest in Arkansas. He's a prison chaplain. So the surrounding neighbors around the prison will donate Bibles, but they will not donate copies of the Quran for prison ministry. So we've taken this up, and there's a jar on the table in the middle of where we're eating, and people put money in the jar, and we sent our first box of Qurans. We sent a box of 30 Qurans to Jeff, the prison chaplain in Arkansas. So I also want us to do things that are socially responsive, not just kind of like gather around and become a club for old, used to be Catholics. Okay, thank you all. I'll pass it on to Johnny. Speaking of Italians.
Hello everyone, my name is Gianni, Father Gianni. I come from Italy, as you can hear it. And sorry for my English, if I make mistakes, you just tell me if you do not understand. I'm the pastor in Holy Angels, which is in Southern California. And I was asked to talk about the young adult ministry that in Southern California, we are just trying to start and to get involved with, not just us as Holy Angels, but I can say at least 3 of the 4 churches that are in Southern California, which is Holy Angels, but also St. Matthew and also Holy Trinity with that. I'm not in charge about that. Lourdes Talamante is a candidate deaconess, but she cannot attend in person at the meeting. So she asked me, since I got part of those 3, to say something about that. So first of all, the point to start this kind of ministry was when I talked about them, how to do that. I just quoted the gospel when there are Greek people who wanted to see Jesus, to meet with Jesus, you remember. We want to see Jesus. And they didn't ask Jesus, well, probably because he was busy, full of people, he was the man in charge. But they didn't even ask Peter or Andrew. They asked Philip, you remember. Why? Because he was the only one who was able to speak Greek. So they needed someone who spoke their own language. So the approach that we wanted to have with the young adult ministry is exactly this one. Try to speak the same language as young adult people can understand, so that we might have a chance, not just to have a friendship with them, but also to show what our faith is. And so maybe they can reach out to Jesus and one day say, we want to see Jesus. For that thing, we made something weird, like, for example, a great friend of mine who collaborates with us, which is his name is Robert Chung, and said, come over to West Hollywood. And I said, well, I'm gay, so it's time that I go to West Hollywood. I've never been there in 7 months. It was July, because I was busy. It's the beginning, you have to think about everything about your life here. So I went there and we went to have some food, and then he told me, he asked me to wear a black cassock, like if we were in a cathedral instead. Okay. So we were the only one there, and then he said, okay, now we're gonna to make a prayer. I said, okay. After dinner, I was not so down for that, but he said, to be honest. And he said, there is a chapel right here. Oh, a chapel. I said, okay. So we went there, and there was the chapel, which is not a church, but is the most famous gay club. It's called the Abbey the Chapel, and that was made on purpose, not just to be against the Roman Catholic Church, but to show there is a phrase that I've noticed when I entered: God is also with us. And that was written many years ago by the gay community in Los Angeles. So can you believe me dressed like that? I mean, not like that, and entering. But as soon as I went at the door, the bodyguards or whoever, they say, oh, Father Robert, that's been a long time. So I so used to do that. So I went with him and he showed me, you saw now there is a show of the drag queens. Can you see there? Of course, he belongs to the LGBTQ community. So I saw that for a little while, there is a stairs. We were looking at that, and then a couple of girls showed up. And they said, oh, isn't it funny? And he said, yeah. And they asked us, and you are the next one? No, we are real. Just to say that there were people who made jokes of us, like people passing by and say, oh, Father, forgive me because I've sinned. But after 1 hour and a half, we had 3 young people sitting with us and telling their own story, how they were kicked out of their own Catholic Church, and that's why they don't believe in God now. Just because they saw us like the church, and they wanted to talk. Why are you here? Because we just wanted to be evident that we are here because we like to have fun with you guys here in the club and having a drink with you. One of them is now attending our church, which is not in Los Angeles, it's in Orange County. So you have to drive 30 minutes on Sunday, and 3 hours in a weekly day, on Sunday. So that is just try to use the language that people can understand. And of course, as a gay person, even though I don't have a partner and whatever, I can probably feel something about that. But our outreach is not just for the LGBT community, it's young adult people. So it's for all. We don't want to be a gay church. We want to be the church. Open to everyone.
Yeah.
So we organized these 2 very first retreats. And I'm thankful about a couple of lay people, very powerful from Holy Trinity, and to clergy, Deacon Tony and Deacon Tammy from St. Matthew, who joined these retreats, a female retreat and a man retreat. One was on the mountains, in the snow, and we started not talking about God. We started talking about their problems. They were like 16 girls. They were like in their 20s, 24, 26, 27, the oldest one. And Deacon Tammy, as a lady, as a girl, was very, very powerful about that. And they talk about their problems in family and whatever. So at the very first comment, I have to confess, I thought, why am I supposed to be here since we're now talking about God and Jesus Christ? That was a temptation. And after 1 hour and a half that those ladies were talking, I just felt that I was sharing their life. As Trish said before, they needed the gospel, even though they were not asking openly for the gospel.
Yeah.
They needed to see that God was just symbolized by me, because even though I was dressing like that or heavier because there was snow on the mountains, but they knew I was a priest, they knew deacon was Tammy was deacon. They started talking about God later on, spontaneously. And then, of course, we invited, joined them, sometimes for mass, not every day. We didn't want to burn them or to say, oh, you know what, we were here to advertise our church. That's not the meaning. I mean, when you do something for young adult people, you don't want to recruit young adult people. You just want to stay with them for their lives, their family, and whatever. That was amazing. Those girls talked all the time. They cried so much. I said, oh my God, I don't think that's gonna happen in the man retreat. And it won't. In the man retreat, they played basketball. We were in Santiago, in San Juan Capistrano, on the mountains, but very hot and different. You know, in California, you can just drive a little bit and the weather changes. They immediately went to the point. They wanted to talk about Jesus. So one of them was a gay guy. So it was the one who started talking. The other one was straight. Many of them were black guys because one black guy came, so their friends accepted to come. And we talked about life and what life means being with Jesus. Some of them belonged to a Presbyterian church. So, you know, it was not about advertising the Catholic Church in an ecumenical way. It was about building the kingdom and showing that the ecumenical Catholic communion is open to everyone, especially if you're Christian from another denomination, and they felt just comfortable like at home. How many of all these girls and guys are attending church, as far as I am concerned, with the eyes of holy angels? Just one, the one I told you before, but it doesn't matter. One, it's great because when I see him attending mass, I can see all the others, you know, in my mind. And that's basically what we're doing. And I have to say that I'm very grateful to the Mary Magdalene Committee, because they basically grant these kind of activities like $2,000 for hiring that place and whatever. We are going to have another one here, and candidate Deacon Lourdes asked me to bring this for you. More than a meeting, breakfast and lunch, come hang out and bring a friend as your speaker panels get real. With healthy relationship, mental health, and self-care, faith. So it's like collect. We're gonna have another one in February, which is focused on LGBT community. What does it mean to belong to the LGBT community and to be a Catholic? Another one who's gonna speak. We have invited some people younger than me, very professional in talking with that. And then we're gonna have, like here at Synod, different groups like faith and LGBT community, faith and social justice, and then they can just join. So young adult retreats or conferences as meetings, or sometimes a party at the chapel at the Abbey, the gay club.
Yeah.
It's just a way to try to look as Philip. I know when you're young, it might be easier to do that, and we do not have so many young people, as far as I'm concerned, in the communion. But that doesn't matter, because there are people like Father Jim Faris, who's not so young, but he joined us for these retreats. And when he opened his mouth, everyone was listening to him much more than they were listening to me. I was just the tool to try to do that. So how to reach out to young adult people? The way we have done are advertising a lot in every way we could. We put a booth 3 weeks ago for Tustin Tiller. We were just there. And there was written, ecumenical, all are welcome, divorced, you are welcome, LGBTQ, you are welcome. So people passed by, there were 50,000 people in that event for 3 days. Probably 30 people stopped by talking. The most interesting for me was a girl. She was probably between her 20s and 30s. She stopped by. She took the flyer, and immediately one of my parishioners said, "Oh, hello." I mean, she did her job, right? "Oh, hello." She said, "No, I'm just calling the priest later on." And I was there, but she didn't want to talk with me. She called me at 10:30 in the night. She was crying. We had a conversation for 1 hour. And after some days, we drank something at a Starbucks, coffee. She took one of this and she said, "Okay, I'm gonna come." She just felt comfortable. She came from a bad experience from her family and her Roman Catholic Church based on that. So how to reach out to people, not be worried to put money to advertise, and to put your heart and your time just to try to be feeling. And if you feel you're not feeling for that, try as much as you can for your own community. That's our advice, to find someone who can help you with that, to be feeling for those people. And that's just what all we have done in this very first year of ministry. So if you have questions, okay. If you don't, sorry for my English. Thank you so much for listening to me anyway. I will put this like in the tables.
Seal. I am Mira Clemens. I am Ani Yunuya. I'm Seragi. I am a descendant of the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians. Our little postage stamp is called Qualla Boundary, and it's up in the foothills of North Carolina. Now I gotta compete with Carol's preaching voice. Bring the word.
It can come off. It can come off if you want to.
It can, but I'd rather just talk if I can. In a good way, I begin this. In a good way, I would like to speak to you. In a good way, I want to teach about the beauty of our in-between. So yesterday was Indigenous Peoples' Day. We are learning more and more not to honor the man who was brought back to Spain in chains for the genocide he committed. Sadly, we continue to commit genocide in this honor. What you're seeing me wearing is a ribbon shirt. It's a pretty common shirt in Indian country. It's pretty unusual to see a ribbon clergy shirt, but I've been wanting one of these for a while. And so the rainbow ribbon clergy shirt says a whole lot. And was made for me by my wife's Chachta cousin. So in the same way that I'm Ani Yunuya, we just get called Cherokee. The Choctaw are Chachta. They're just called Choctaw. And our ways and paths speak of creator and don't dial down to details in the same way. There is not a conflict between walking by traditional ways and walking in Christianity, but the conflict created by boarding schools, by the doctrine of discovery, by the genocide that continues to this day, creates a conflict. Just last night, I was messaging with a gay friend, and he said, I know and I honor the fact that you're doing healing, but you're doing it in the uniform of the enemy. Uniform of the enemy. I spent about an hour talking to Luca that night, last night, just literally last night. Because we have so many wounds. And when I went through that ordination process and that came out as finally people were finding evidence of our little babies who never made it home from boarding schools. That we've been telling you all were out there. Little babies taken from us. Kill the Indians, save the man. These are the wounds. And yet that's not the gospel. It never was the gospel. It was some imperial gospel that's grown into the Christian nationalism we're seeing now.
Yes.
That has in it not a shred of Christ.
Yes.
Exactly.
There you go. And the people need healing.
Yeah.
They need the Rebbe who said, come sit down, we'll share food. I'm poor like you. I was a refugee. I ran to Egypt without papers.
Right.
That's who we serve, and it's who we have to share. And so I want to talk about my life from a piece of trying to show you that you too have intersectionalities. We all know that we don't completely fit anywhere. We feed this part of our soul here and this part of our soul here. And if we're very fortunate, we manage to feed all of our soul between them. And I spent a lot of my life with my native side and my church side, and never the twain shall meet because it's gonna get ugly. And I was partly healed from that by Episcopal Church's Native American ministries and by Kateri circles, which are the Native Catholics. You've watched me working on this stole. This is the stole that I was ordained in. And I'm going to be working on this stole for years, and that too as a teacher. And I don't have time in 15 minutes to talk about all the symbolism. But I want you to notice that those red hands were the missing and murdered Indigenous women and persons. Those are the hands on my shoulders. Because it is our need and our duty to feed those who are hungry with the food they need to eat. It is also our need and our duty to speak for those who have been silenced. So those are the hands on my shoulders to speak forward truth. Now, I'm a light-skinned Indigenous person. I'm a military brat from military culture who didn't go serve. Because let me tell you, don't ask, don't tell was a serious improvement on what came before it, but that ain't saying much.
Exactly.
And I could not face the risk of a dishonorable discharge being called dishonorable. So I didn't serve. So you will see all the military in every move I make. But I am not a veteran. I pass as male. Let me tell you all, the truth is a little more complicated than that. I was born intersex. I was born between genders. Are you detecting what's your sexuality? I was forced to pass female because I had these things hanging out front that made everybody think I was female. I wore a warrior's braid because it was a way that I could claim my maleness when everyone else needed to see femaleness, and I kind of needed to work for a living. I didn't permit myself to go get some surgery to remove that inconvenience because I was afraid of the surgery and because I felt like I needed to speak to that in between. I needed to make people uncomfortable with the space in the middle. I've been shaving since I was 16 and I had breasts. This is a little awkward in our society. Okay. And my disabilities are invisible. I'm a dyslexic special ed teacher. I was able to testify in my state capitol for creating dyslexia as a service category, as a dyslexic teacher of dyslexic students. Representation matters. I was speaking to another clergy member who is there despite disability and able to speak and lead and preach despite disability. And that is representation of inclusion of truth. Now, in the way that I was raised in the teachings I was raised in, those of us who are called to be in between because we are born in between. If we're between male and female, then we can be a counselor. We can explain men to women and women to men. And if we can tackle that, we're diplomats because we can probably explain this group to that group and that group to this group. And if we can do that, we can probably do the hardest thing, which is to explain God to people and people to God. I grew up knowing my vocation because of my traditions. When you are in between, you have a choice. You can be a walks between, or you can be a walks among. As the person who never quite fit in this group or that group, we were talking about table groups and all of that in school. I was the person who could go between the groups and was accepted in the groups. I was never part of their group, but I was that bridge. My life has always been that bridge. And I'm gonna point out that our Savior had no Y chromosomes. So I'm gonna suggest that our Savior was just a bit of a bridge. And I call Christ he when I don't call any other aspect of God he, because that's how Christ self-identified. Right?
Preach here.
I'm a son. All right, you're a he. I'm down with that. Okay. Now, I'm going to talk about some of the conversations that my bishop and I have had. Because she wasn't entirely sure about me. There was something she wasn't sure of while I was stepping on who I was and not speaking my truth. What I have discovered in actually letting me be me is the load off my back is huge, y'all.
Yay.
I can fill my lungs with the spirit and exhale healing with all of me without a part trying to stick on control of whatever part of me is not suitable for public consumption.
Preach, Mayor.
Okay. Other people who see some concern, there's something not true in what you're coming across to me with. That gets solved. You get all of me now. And those who feel other feel seen. Those who feel other feel seen. The fact that we have clergy with visible and audible disabilities here. The fact that we have clergy who come from every social and economic level means that we're starting to have clergy that represent us. I'm gonna say that if I'm the closest person of color you can find, look hard.
Yeah.
Okay, now I do say that every single time I'm asked to be a POC in public speaking. I'm like, really? Really? Work harder. All right. So, when you have that, you can live your full self, you can give your full self. Let's talk about welcoming the other. The ECC chose to ordain me, having watched me transition from attempting to pass female to attempting to pass male. I think I'm doing better this time. The ECC accepted what is at least partially trans clergy. I'm a little hard to define, back to the intersectionality, but for those going at home, I basically count as trans. I'm just XTM instead of FTM. Think about what that says for our inclusion. Here's the funny thing, I was the one male presence on the presiding bishop nominating committee. I'm gonna say we had a whole lot of cojones in the walls. Okay. That's kind of hilarious when you think about the fact that I'm the token male. That was a moment that I am probably going to enjoy for the rest of my life, is being the token male. All right. That in between, you have to hear hard truths. And you can do that best from acknowledging your own intersectionalities. Because when you're going to include other communities, we live some hard truths, y'all. If you can't accept them and receive them, you're not receiving us. So I'm going to give you a hint. Hear the hard truth with an accepting face. Just receive it. Go process it later, not with the other person.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
Absolutely go process it later. Not with the other person. Oh my God, it makes me so uncomfortable that you're telling me this about it. No. Thank you for sharing this truth with me. Let me sit with that for a while. I need to think about that. Totally fair response, but a receptive response.
Yeah.
We have to make and shape space for others to make it welcome. People notice when you use inclusive language. People notice, they're listening for it. They will look at your websites. When I travel, I look at church websites to see if I can find enough keywords in there that I might possibly be welcomed. That my queer siblings can be welcomed. Maybe even we can cross the great divide of 11 a.m. on Sunday morning and have a little bit more inclusion of facial colors. What a scary thought. So we have to shape that space. My entire ministry is to those who are victims of church trauma. This was pointed out to me by the former atheist who's a budding theologian and liturgist. Because she looked at me laughing in a picture from my ordination and said, well, if I'd seen a priest like that, I might have. And I said, you still could. And she took me up on it because, you make that flip comment and you never know. But she did. And oh my goodness, she's a backbone. Okay. So we have a lot of people who are victims of church abuse. I am going to commend you to looking into Saint Dymphna. And I just noticed the people who said, oh yeah. I'm guessing the people who said, oh yeah, are working in mental health or working with their own mental health, are working with abuse or working with their own abuse. Hint, most of us who work in the field, it's because we know the field intimately. So there are ways and examples of creating that inclusion. I know the queer clobber verses. I have had them shouted at me because I came out of the 80s. I fought with that I fought with the original batch of censorship bills. I know where they were going to incarcerate us queers to protect the world from AIDS. It was the old TV wards, and I drove by a TV ward and I knew where they wanted to walk me. Because I know that fight, people know I'm real when I say no, and like that here, let me tell you about half our bishops. You know, the only street bishops we have, you know. Anybody thought about that? So the other group that I seriously work with are the geeks. By the way, having fought for our identity against families who thought that D&D was gonna take us to the devil. Oh my God, there's a demon on the cover. No, that's Paul Rudd. That conversation never went well. Okay? So a lot of the geeks as kids were othered by their families. I'm even talking about the time, I'm sure I'm over.
No, you go. I'm not gonna.
Okay, so that geek community, now a lot of that geek community thinks they're too smart for God because they're too smart for the arguments that were blamed on God. Okay? But again, these communities, you drop a reference here or there in your homilies to your own little geeks. And trust me, we'll hear those keywords just like the queers hear our keywords. Okay? Just like somebody will make me cry when he asks for permission to speak in a public conversation. Just as land acknowledgement is a great first start, but hey, real red Duwamish, there are ways to actually try to make reparations. We must include in our actions, words and deeds. To do that, we have to be our full, authentic selves. We have to acknowledge our intersectionalities, and we have to be unafraid to bring them out. Let your freak flag fly. Woo! That is a phrase that has been around for a minute, but you know what? The kids know it too. Okay? Because if we are truly honest that God sees us and knows all of us, inside your head and think you're never. Okay? Your people need to know that you're weird. Your people need to know you're real. I have preached a funeral using readings from the Silmarillion. Yep, we all got our own reading. Yeah, we do.
Exactly.
And that's the beauty of our humanity. God didn't want lockstep angels, if you recall. God gave us the burden and power of free will. Consent. We have to include. We have to include ourselves to be able to do that. We have to listen. Remember? With a person in crisis, they get to vent out, and then you vent out, you don't vent back into the person in crisis. It's a deal. Person of color, generational trauma is a thing.
Yeah.
We're learning so much about epigenetics. But here's the thing I'm gonna promise you. We eat our trauma. Our neurology, our biochemistry changes as we eat our trauma. Guess what? Neuroplasticity means that we eat our freedom. We can undo neurological and biochemical harm that we've done to our bodies by eating the harm that we have been exposed to. So if you walk into your intersectionality and your truth, I promise you, you will not only serve better, you will live better. And I guarantee unto you, you will love better.
Absolutely.
It is enough.
Amen.
Thank you to all of our speakers. Glad you could join us today.
That was,
Very
yeah,
much, everyone. Thank you.
that was, yeah. Oh, so
It's good to know that we don't have to feel alone in the wilderness.
Come to me, all you who hunger, come be nourished without price. Come and drink of that new river of life. Bring the lowly and the children, bring your labor and your strife. Come and drink of that new river of life. Why waste your money on things that are not real, on food that will not nourish you, and on water that cannot fill? Come to me, all you who hunger, come be nourished without price. Come and drink of that new river of life. Bring the lowly and the children, bring your labor and your strife. Come and drink of that new river of life. I am water to the thirsty, to the hungry I am bread. I will bear up your burdens, I will raise you from the dead. Come to me, all you who hunger, come be nourished without price. Come and drink of that new river of life. Bring the lowly and the children, bring your labor and your strife. Come and drink of that new river of life. I will promise my covenant to all who will hear. Come and seek me where I am found. I will always be ever near. Come to me, all you who hunger, come be nourished without price. Come and drink of that new river of life. Bring the lowly and the children, bring your